Truett Hess and his neighbors have complained for years about the fire on their mountain. The smoke, odor, and flames from North Carolina's only commercial hazardous waste incinerator. They say it's poisoned their land, made them sick, and may be killing the people who work there. Despite complaints, the state of North Carolina admits it's having a hard time explaining just why it's found so little wrong.
Nobody is able to explain to those just average people what these things are in a manner they can understand it.
There's been too much evidence against Caldwell Systems, too many unanswered questions for county commissioners. So when the state wouldn't act on its own to close the incinerator, the county commission did. They said there's too much illness and too much pollution, so they took the county's name off crucial paperwork and ordered the company, Caldwell Systems, out of the county-owned incinerator. That, they expect, will close it. It happened because many people in Caldwell County think state regulators have lied to them and not enforced their own rules. And it showed in the first public meeting with a state regulator last week in Lenoir.
I make the final decision on GSX. The buck stops here. And Ms. Miller, is that not what I said?
No. Do we have to drop dead before you'll close the facility, Mr. Meyer?
I have had enough and I want it closed.
Despite opposition, Hazardous Waste Management Chief Bill Meyer argues the plant is in substantial compliance with state rules and suggests it should get a permanent license.
The decision is not that he has operated bad in the past. The decision we have to make is substantial compliance.
Now.
The head of a county study group argues, so what if the incinerators improve? The damage is already done, and you don't just overlook that. Bill Pittman warns if the state can't regulate its proposed incinerator any better than it has Caldwell Systems, even bigger problems lie ahead.
It seems to me like too many people have been dragging their feet, and to me this is not an issue that should be stretched out and out. It's something that needs to be resolved immediately.
Caldwell Systems, which says it's run within the regulations providing waste destruction services, refused to talk with us for this report. The incinerator may be closed this year, and the fire on the mountain may go out. But it's a victory with a bitter taste for Truett Hess and his neighbors, for they say they were told the state would protect them, but feel it did not. And even though they win, they lose. Their mountain's polluted, and they have been made sick from a plant that meets all the rules. Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Caldwell County. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and Kim Hass walks the family dairy herd up the side of Lick Mountain. When Mary Hass comes out to join her husband Truett for the milking, she has to bring along a respirator to help her breathe just in case the smoke and fumes blowing down the mountain smother her, as she says they do nearly every day.
This morning they were bad. They really were. And then I don't know, it gave me a headache and I hurt my back and I got to where I couldn't get my breath good. Yeah, and I couldn't get my breath good, so I wore this thing off and on all day.
Sometimes the smoke is so thick and smelly down in this holler that the Hasses have actually had to leave home. The odor and the smoke come, they say, from up there. Caldwell Systems runs North Carolina's only commercial hazardous waste incinerator to burn the dangerous chemicals left over after industry makes things we all use. A local citizens group, though, has gathered evidence that shows the operation may be dangerous to the people who work here and live nearby. There are charges the company has contaminated the air, water, and soil, illegally dumped chemicals on Truett Hass's farm and in the county landfill, and failed to protect its own workers from the chemicals they're working with. Company officials vigorously deny the allegations and say they meet all state and federal laws.
We've been inspected approximately 50 times since the beginning of the year. We've had midnight inspections by EPA regulators, and we have always come out with a clean bill of health.
State and federal regulators agree.
And we have checked this facility more than the normal number of times to make sure that it was meeting all of the state requirements, and it did.
But within an hour of that statement by Flaherty, a study committee appointed by Caldwell County Commissioners voted unanimously to recommend the incinerator be closed as a community health hazard.
That our county health director declare this operation a health hazard to the residents and thereby force its closure.
Tomorrow, what has caused people like the Hasses to become so upset, and why does this doctor call the incinerator a health hazard? Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News on Lick Mountain.
That seem to be abundant in the area are respiratory illness.
Not a lot changes on Lick Mountain. Summer is now winter, but Truett Hass is still working his farm, and up the hill Caldwell Systems is still burning toxic wastes. A few things have changed. Neighbors say improvements at the plant mean they don't get sick from smoke and odor as often as they did. Even so, 2 employees are now totally disabled. Doctors say they were poisoned by the chemicals they were handling at the plant. And the state admits Truett Hass's farm is chemically contaminated. And at least 20 incinerator employees or former employees say they dumped the chemicals onto Hass's farm. And when the state wouldn't act to do something about it, county commissioners took steps which will likely close the incinerator. The news about the incinerator seems to favor the opponents, but for Truett Hass's family, they live just down the hill from the incinerator, the news is worse and worse. Hass's wife, Mary, still wears a respirator to breathe sometimes because of chemicals in the air, her doctors say. But now the publicity about pollution on the farm has virtually put the dairy farm out of business.
It ain't much of a future right now. They're looking awful dim.
When Truett and Mary finish milking, what isn't given to the neighbors or poured onto the floor for the pets is dumped out into the yard. Not because the milk's bad, his customers say. They cut him off because it might be. And what has the state done?
I'm just upset with the state. That's a slow, draggy way. They're dragging their feet, trying to get something done. If they're trying, let me put it that way, if they're trying. I ain't too sure they're even trying.
I made the statement.
Last week, a key state regulator told Caldwell County residents the incinerator meets most of the state's rules.
Do we have to drop dead before you'll close the facility, Mr. Meyer?
The buck stops here.
The state doesn't seem anxious to close the incinerator. So what happens when everybody's convinced they're right? That story tomorrow night. Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Lick Mountain. It's 2:30 on a rainy Thursday morning, and there's a fire on the mountain. Caldwell Systems' 24-hour operation is burning chemicals. At the stack of the incinerator appears to be a 4-foot flame, but company and state officials insist there's no flame there.
There are no flames that come above a stack. So visual perception, it was no problem and it's not illegal.
What you saw, the 4-foot flames, were not flames. They are ionized gases.
But a chemistry professor says if it's ionized gas, it's a flame.
The definition of a flame is a chemical reaction that gives off light, and it will be ionized gas. There is no difference.
The difference is important to understanding why Caldwell Systems has been called a health hazard. Officials say flames mean incomplete combustion, that chemicals are not being destroyed, rather changed into other chemicals. And a new state report confirms incomplete combustion at the facility, suggesting soot and hydrochloric acid are coming out, damaging vegetation. Residents say they are breathing it. Cotton Johnson says his 2-year-old son's asthma is so sensitive he can tell which way the wind's blowing just listening to William breathe.
When the wind flow would come from that direction, we would notice the rattling in his breathing would increase.
Dr. Mark Guerra says patient problems like Williams come from Caldwell Systems.
Have patients that are sick as a result of emissions from Caldwell Systems. They include residents that have respiratory illnesses due to particulates that they are exposed to, as well as hydrochloric acid.
More serious, he says, are patients showing signs of phosgene, or mustard gas poisoning. Guerra says it can come from chemicals not being totally burned. Regulators argue incomplete combustion's not illegal, and they can't prove Caldwell is the source.
There is yet no technical or legal evidence to suggest that those impacts are due to emissions from Caldwell Systems.
Critics counter the state's at the root of the problem by letting the incinerator burn more than it was designed to. The manufacturer says it should burn just under 1,900 pounds of waste an hour. The state permit lets it burn more than 4,000. Critics say not burning dangerous chemicals completely is the reason for health problems. The company says it's eliminating the problems, but critics say it's too late. Tomorrow, the story of a man who may be dying because of chemical exposure. Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Caldwell County.
Give us some more sugar.
They have been exposed on a daily basis by inhalation and direct skin contact to multiple wastes, which they have not had been educated to the medical or potential medical effects.
Workers at Caldwell Systems' hazardous waste incinerator are getting sick, a doctor says, from the work they do.
Their medical illnesses can be attributable to the chemical exposures that they have had while working there.
Glenn Ray Taylor told local investigators his story of little safety equipment and having no idea what he was working with.
When we had to clean the tanks, we didn't have respirators to start with till after I had the incident with the styrene.
Glenn Ray backed a loader into a barrel of styrene.
It got all over me and I like to die.
He also told of Caldwell Systems employees dumping chemicals onto Truett Hass's farm and of workers having fights with chemical sludge balls, allegations the company denies. At first, Glenn Ray Taylor's story didn't fly very well. Folks didn't think he was the best witness. For one thing, he'd served time for breaking and entering and larceny. But Glenn Ray, who's lost 50 pounds in the last year and a half, says he doesn't think he has anything to lose. You see, he may be dying. Other workers confirmed his story and told even more. Now Glenn Ray has a lung disease he says that threatens his life. He worries for his daughter.
See, I ain't scared of dying. It's just knowing that I don't know what I'm dying from. I might not live to see 31. But I want to provide for her the best I can, you know, until it's done and over with.
On our appointment at the plant, workers handling chemicals were dressed in protective clothing and wearing respirators. When we went back a week later, workers in the same area were not. Company officials backed their training and safety program.
We do the best we can. We probably feel our people are far more trained than anyone else in the state concerning hazardous waste.
The state has heard health complaints for years, but only recently began a health study. Even so, Dr. Guerra says none of his patients have even been contacted. The health issue has led Congressman Cass Ballinger to demand the plant's closing.
These aren't wild, hippy-dippy people. These are just good old country folks that are complaining about sore chest, coughs, burning eyes.
But would closing Caldwell Systems cause more problems than it solves? That report tomorrow. Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Caldwell County. North Carolina cannot handle its industry's chemical garbage. That's why understanding what Caldwell Systems is supposed to do and what residents say it has done is important.
All we handle is industrial waste, just the goop and sludge and grime from industry that's produced as a byproduct of American society.
You can't wave a magic wand or spread pixie dust over waste and make it go away. If you want the benefits that society provides for you, you've got to handle materials properly.
The idea is for the plant to burn chemicals and destroy them. Right now, burning is thought to be the safest way to get rid of dangerous chemical wastes. It can be 99.99% effective. But charges this company doesn't burn properly, has polluted soil, water, and air, and has ignored worker and public safety has led a county-appointed group to call for its closing as a health hazard.
There seems to be a problem. There seems to be a health hazard. What are we going to do about it?
My question for Dr. Guerra is this a health hazard?
Yes, it is a present health hazard. There's no doubt about that.
State officials have been sharply criticized for letting the problem go so long, but they say this plant meets their regulations.
Right now they're doing a good job, and we just did an inspection on them, and they came through it real good.
They do want Caldwell Systems under a new permit that imposes stricter rules than the company has to follow now. Governor Jim Martin says the state needs hazardous waste treatment or it will lose federal money and the state's industry could suffer major problems.
You tell the chemical industry that they can't generate waste, then there won't be a chemical industry, and there wouldn't be a textile industry, and there probably wouldn't be much of a food industry.
But it's the perception that the people at the top haven't been told what's going on that's led critics to believe problems at Caldwell Systems are being hidden somewhere in the regulatory process just to keep the incinerator in operation.
People that live at the bottom of the hill that have to wear a respirator to go milk the cows.
Well, I didn't realize that somebody was going to milk their cows wearing a respirator.
The company says it's spending $1.5 million to improve and go beyond current regulations. Spokesmen defend the operation, adding what they do is important to the state.
People who want these facilities to just go away are creating environmental problems. They just don't realize it.
And it's the state's dire need that will have a hazardous waste treatment center site announced next week, with Durham one of the finalists. Tomorrow, what have we learned? Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Caldwell County. Lick Mountain, home for Truett Hass and his friends, and Caldwell Systems' controversial incinerator. It's well known for its rattlesnakes, but residents say they haven't been much of a problem the last couple of years. A state biologist has made a rather curious finding. There are very few bugs around here. No chiggers, no mosquitoes, very few flies on the Hass farm, even around the dairy barn. And about a month ago, after a rain shower, Hass says, thousands of worms crawled out of the ground and died. Residents say they suspect chemicals have poisoned everything around.
I've never seen nothing like that in my 49 years. They just died. They just died right there.
Problems of hazardous waste aren't confined to Lick Mountain. Nearly all industry makes it. Our officials say the state isn't equipped to get rid of it all. So as the state prepares to build a hazardous waste treatment center that'll handle 10 times the volume of Caldwell Systems, come questions from the people on Lick Mountain about the state's environmental laws and the people who enforce them. Like why L.C. Kuntz, a high school chemistry teacher, and Cotton Johnson, a used car salesman, had to spend their own money to find out things they say the state should have known. Why no one has investigated 10 years of health complaints. Why the state never fined Caldwell Systems when the federal government recommended it. Why no one will call a flame because it might show something's wrong. Residents charge not only are environmental laws weak, so is their enforcement by regulators.
We have a facility that doesn't have strong regulations with any teeth in them to govern it or monitor the facility. To me, that's the most alarming thing of the whole situation.
They do agree the state must be able to destroy hazardous industrial waste, and incineration is the best way, but not, they say, the way Caldwell Systems operates.
Trying to pass off the kind of disposal that we have now as best available technology, though, is ridiculous.
We all expect that if the state says it's protecting us from something, that we are being protected. The people on Lick Mountain said they trusted the state, but the state failed them. A county study committee said that near Lenore, environmental laws may have been stretched or broken, while the state ignored appeals for help. Meanwhile, the Eno River is being considered as the site for a hazardous waste treatment center because the waste is still with us. So the bottom line question tonight is whether the state can control the waste and protect us at the same time. I'm Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News. At the base of the Blue Ridge Mountain, night sneaks in and quiet steals into the hollers. But tonight at the base of Lick Mountain in Caldwell County, a lot of people felt like celebrating. After 11 years fighting the Caldwell Systems incinerator, they had won. The incinerator was being dismantled. It was time to get together. So they went down to the drag strip, picked up a band, and threw themselves a party.
Right on the wrong side of town.
Carolyn Miller got it started, and soon folks who had expected to two-step to country music were boogieing to heavy metal. It was what the 200 people who live in the neighborhood around the incinerator were celebrating that was important. The incinerator was shut down.
We knew that this would happen sooner or later. It's just we was beginning to wonder how long it would take. It's to celebrate the fact that we finally got something done about the problem.
For Boyce Roberts, it was the end of a struggle that began long before the incinerator was ever built.
We've had to fight every county commissioners group we've had. We've had to convince state regulators that they were not doing their job.
Houston Crow, who lives near the incinerator, sat watching tonight. Tests show he only breathes about a third as well as he should.
It's been pretty bad. A lot of times you couldn't even get outside, especially hot days like this. Had to leave the windows closed. And nighttime, wake up in the morning, the headaches.
The piece that was broken a dozen years ago by an incinerator's roar was replaced by night that just kind of snuck in. Dave Boliek, WTVD 11 News, Caldwell County. Keith Killian doesn't visit his mother much anymore, even though she lives next door.
I'm 27 years old. I got permanent brain damage. Things keep getting worse.
Keith's a legacy of the Caldwell Systems hazardous waste incinerator on the top of Lick Mountain.